Let me indicate that there's some developments taking place in the country all of which are attracting the attention of the government, and some of them are not very uplifting. I'm very, very shaken and disturbed by what happened out in the east with that child, where a guardian and a youngster were so brutally murdered, and it makes us wonder what kind of people we have become. I know it is standard practice whenever any violent crime occurs, especially those heinous ones like this, that there is a demand that the government do something about crime. And that demand is understandable because people want to feel safe, people want to feel secure, and people want to know that their families and their communities are protected from these things. But the interventions by individuals who make a decision to carry out these kinds of activities shock us all the time. As long as they happen, they will shock us, because whatever we have in place, whether it is police, whether it is prison, whether it is court, we are always surprised by these kinds of development, and my deepest condolences go out to the family that just looking at it on television as a non-member of the family, I was quite shaken by this kind of thing, and I trust that the law enforcement authorities would find the perpetrator of such heinous and disturbing action. We also have had a situation where for the last week or 10 days, a number of members of the national community in the south have been subjected to the effects of Tropical Storm Bret. And while most people have gone back to some sense of normalcy, there are still a few people who are still, especially those persons where the water has not drained off from the areas where they live in the low-lying lagoons. They are still being affected. I want to say that the government has an agency called ODPM, where O means office, D means disaster, P planning, and M management. Well, we did in fact maintain the office. We do maintain a well-staffed office there. The disaster was Bret, came and went. We did plan to respond to whatever Bret brought for us, and then there's the management. There are developments taking place now. On today, Cabinet signed off on the funding, which we have finalized of the fund at $30 million, because initially we had said 25, but given the more details as to the demands that might be made, especially from the agricultural sector, we add an extra $5 million. And for some people that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but let me just tell you, $30 million is a lot of money. It might not be sufficient for all the needs, but it is not an inconsequential sum, especially at this time where the government is not having at its disposal large sums of money, where you can say that money is not a problem. Money is a problem at this time in particular. And we have found $30 million for those persons for whom the items of relief will come in a variety of ways. And we will continue to provide assistance until some sense of normalcy has been returned across the board. I want to say that what is being provided is not compensation. The government is not to compensate anybody. What is being provided is assistance, because you can't be compensated every year. You live in the watercourse or you plant in the watercourse and then you get damage and you get compensation. What you get is assistance from the national community to get back on your feet. And that assistance will be insofar as we are able to provide it, and we provide as much as we can. The departments that are doing this, I trust that the officers are going out and determining who qualify. And of course, this being Trinidad and Tobago, there will be persons who will seek to get as much as they can, and persons who don't qualify at all, who will seek to access it. I will just appeal to those persons to stand at the back of the line and allow those who are in need and who genuinely qualify to access what little the country has to offer. I also want to say that at this juncture in the government's history, we are approaching the 2-year mark in September. The Parliament goes on recess in the early part of July, and we would have finished and we prepare for the next budget. And this is a good time to have looked at the government, of course with our eye, as you've been looking at the government all along. But as we look at the government, we look at the work program ahead, we look at where we are having successes and where we need to buck up. And as Prime Minister, it fell to me to make some small adjustments to the cabinet. I made no fanfare about it because I know cabinet reshuffle, or the last government used to call it realignment, used to be something that was regular and so on. But as the cabinet goes along managing the country's affairs, from time to time you need to make certain adjustments. I've made 3 adjustments on this occasion. One is putting Mr. Hines in the Attorney General's office. And the main driving thought behind that is that the Attorney General's office going forward into 2018 in particular would be an area of great activity. You would have seen that we are pushing through the Parliament a very aggressive legislative program. And in that program, a lot of it has to do with the criminal justice system, and also we have a very big item which should be landing in the Parliament at the beginning of the next term, and that is this whole question of the Tobago self-government discussions. There's a document that exists now, present in the government, coming from Tobago. It's not a perfect document by far. The government has not finalized its position on all clauses in that document. We still believe that we need to talk with the people in Tobago, the THA and the rest of Tobago, on it. So a small group of ministers working on this document in preparation for a cabinet position, because the cabinet will look at it and it will be the cabinet that will take it to the Parliament. So the cabinet has to have some kind of position on what has come from Tobago. A lot of consultation took place in Tobago. Of course, not everybody is happy with what has come out of those consultations, but let it not be said that they were not consultations and that they were not extensive and that they were not guided by experienced people. We still have not seen the perfect item called Tobago, internal self-government for Tobago. But we know that we've made some significant progress, and it is my intention as head of this cabinet to take what has come out of Tobago through the cabinet and into the Parliament, straight into a joint select committee arrangement where the entire House of Parliament will determine, with proper advocacy of course, what we will agree on in the end, and hopefully in 2018 the government, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago would rise to the occasion of agreeing to some great measure, if not totally, with the people of Tobago as to what level of autonomy Tobago would finally receive and continue to develop. Tobago has demonstrated an ability to improve its condition from 1980. Then we had a revised House of Assembly Act, and they've been running the Assembly now for the last 20-odd years, and we think that the time has come, based on all the work that has been done, that we could make some further steps and then live peacefully after, having given Tobago as much autonomy as is reasonable within what we all agree should be a unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a matter that's going to go to the Parliament. And right now the Attorney General, the Minister of Planning and Development, and the new Minister in the Attorney General's office have been detailed by the Cabinet to work this particular issue with Tobago and the opposition. So this would be a major item in the Parliament, as well as some of the criminal justice and other matters that we are seeking to make changes for improvement in the management of criminal conduct in the country and the dispensing of justice, which goes with those actions, particularly of persons who are harming and hurting us along the way. We have no difficulty in being criticized as long as the criticism is reasonable and contributes to the final outcome. and we acknowledge the opposition. We came out of the opposition into government, and we acknowledge that the opposition has a role to play, and we trust that they will play that role as part of the overall management of the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. It does no citizen well if the approach in the parliament is one that we're never going to cooperate with anybody else who is not part of our political entity, and that we will never support anything that, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, hoping that in so doing that we will not make any progress, and of course it will improve other people's chances. We have demonstrated quite well that one can cooperate fully with the government and still win the next election. We cooperated very well with the last government. The vast majority of bills brought to the parliament had opposition support, including a budget being voted for by the last opposition. And every significant piece of legislation, you would have seen that a P&M opposition would have cooperated with the government of the day, because it is our view that what is good for the country we support, what we think is not good for the country we oppose, and we do so with this tremendous responsibility. And that's why in the Ministry of Finance, this country is now going through some very, very significant challenges. There are certain commentators, columnists, who have to write a column every week, and the easiest column to write is that the government is the most incompetent. But let me say something to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is the competence of this government functioning as is expected by those who elected us, which has allowed us to be where we are today and not in a far worse position. So just think about that when you judge this government's competence. As a matter of fact, as I speak to you now, we are comfortable with respect to the work that we've done in the last year in the energy sector, the only sector that has the ability in the medium term, not to mention the short term or the immediate, to give us any prospect of any way out of our current circumstances. And when we recently finally engaged the producers of oil and gas in this country and got an agreement on a gas price and triggered over $10 billion of investment in the energy sector, and that companies like BP and Shell and EOG and others are now actively engaged in the energy sector with the clearance, all based on an agreement on a gas price. And let me tell you all something. It wasn't very easy to agree on a gas price, because downstreamers have a gas price that they want, which is a low one, because their products are facing competition in the marketplace that requires a more competitive gas price, which is a low price. The upstreamers are working in an expensive environment where the production of gas is costing more and want a high price for the gas. And it took a government like this government to bring those two horns together and get off the dilemma of a gas price that is acceptable to the downstreamers and those who are producing gas and wanting a high price. We've successfully done that, and if this government does nothing else for which it can take credit, we take credit for that, because we were led to believe that our problem was one of maintenance when nothing was being done. Because I can tell you, gas and oil, gas in particular being so important to us, since 2013, there were major companies on month-to-month contract arrangements in this country. You wouldn't believe that when you listen to those who are talking now and wanting to give us advice, because they are all experts now. It's amazing how they become experts when they're out of office. But month-to-month. And who will invest billions of dollars on a month-to-month contract? This government has dealt with that. And in terms of initiative with respect to new investments in the area, we met the last cabinet putting in place an arrangement that was meant to destroy our energy sector. And that was that a new company coming in will get the gas that's available, and the older companies that are in point leases using gas, they would not. have first call on that gas. First call on the gas will go to the new company. That's what we met. We had to change that. And it took us working between Port of Spain and Tokyo to change that. So when we talk about our competence, those are the things we talk about. The things that matter to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And those are fundamental things. So we can breathe a little easier now that we have dealt with the energy sector items that were so important and for which the groundwork and the foundation had not been addressed. With respect to cross-border gas, we have made more progress on cross-border gas in the last year than has been made in the last 15 years. As a matter of fact, Minister Martinez was due here on Wednesday, and he had to cancel his visit because of certain developments that took place in Caracas. But in the very near future, we are very close to the final signatures on a term sheet where we are partnering with Shell and working with the Venezuelan entity so that cross-border gas, right, can become part of the resource base of Trinidad and Tobago. And for those for whom that is not an act of competence, for us it might have been an act of desperation. But we have been successful so far, and we'll pursue that. With respect to our foreign policy, Trinidad and Tobago, run by a PNM government, and having grown up in an environment where we were directed by the founder of the PNM and the father of this nation, we place great store on our position with respect to non-interference in other people's affairs, and we know what our role and our significance is with respect to our position in CARICOM, our position in the OAS, and our position at the UN. A PNM government is not a novice in these matters, and we follow certain principles, and therefore we cannot be encouraged into certain VAPs and vice actions. And the first interest that we serve is the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So we've strengthened the Ministry of Finance. Ms. Alison West, who is used to be a former public servant, treasury solicitor. She's tremendously experienced in the public service, and then she went into the private sector and was a senior partner at one of the major accounting firms. And she's tremendously experienced and brings to the cabinet a wealth of experience and competence in dealing with matters relating to taxation. And as we've said before, we are moving forward full speed ahead with the Revenue Authority. That should be in the Parliament after this recess. And we are completing our initiative with respect to property tax so that we can have those situations cleared up. And the whole question of the state of the BIR, which is in fact a headache for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. These matters we expect to be dealt with comprehensively as we go forward. So the workload of the Ministry of Finance, I mentioned earlier on the state enterprise sector, the workload of the Ministry of Finance is tremendous, and it gets larger as the government takes on more responsibility to deal with things that have been swept under the carpet or with the cans that have been kicked down the road. This government is not kicking very many cans down the road, or any cans for that matter. We have been seeking to confront head-on the things that need to be done. And it's against that background that we are currently digesting the report on Petrotrin. We've had a major meeting of the Energy Committee last Wednesday, and we are awaiting Petrotrin's response to the report, and the Ministry of Energy's response, and the Ministry of Finance. We're giving everybody an opportunity to put their 2 cents in, because we have a foundation document, and in the next week or two, the Cabinet should be dealing with that matter, and we'll be taking some very firm positions, because there are a number of national issues which can no longer be left on the shelf. And this government has the will and the competence to treat with those issues.